Good evening and welcome to WarrenThornton.com. Good evening, everybody, and a hearty and warm welcome to the show. Because of various shadow bans, and we get shadow banned everywhere, we tell you the truth on this channel. You might not like it, but as I say, it's the truth you need to hear. If you don't like it, can't do anything about that, but we will tell you the truth. The mainstream media hide from you, and I think it is massively important. And of course, you do get to have your say here as well. Which is massively important. We are, what I believe, the best interactive news show out there. And of course, with everybody that we have that gives us all the wonderful information and the contacts we have, we're able to bring you stuff well ahead that many other people report on afterwards. Let's have a little look at this. There we are. So, of course, we're going to be talking maps tonight, and we're going to be looking at all things to do with the Russia-Ukraine war. What's fact, what's fiction, what's true, what's not true. And we're going to go through it in some detail. And then we're going to play somebody else's maps, who is very, very good, just to see whether they match the same sort of stuff that we are getting from our sources. And they might be slightly different, but hopefully they won't be massively out. They may well be, because we haven't looked. We've just downloaded their stuff, so you can compare it to ours. And it is a guy called Scott from Calibrated, who's pretty good with his maps. But of course, we've got people who are right there. He keeps a very close eye on all this stuff, and he goes into very great detail. So he is somebody that's worth having a look at. But we're going to go through our maps. We're going to go through our stuff, and we're going to talk to you about what is going on. Now, it is very, very straightforward. You would have heard that Zelensky is claiming a massive missile, fantastic thing that they've done. They've actually got the flamingos to fly, but they're not flying very well, as you can see by the crater there. They were attacking. They said they wiped out a Russian position, which was a major factory or whatever. They missed. The missile fell well short, so it didn't do any damage. And we've got lots of people turning around and going, oh, that's not true. The satellite photo is there for you to see. And of course, lots of people talk about this and everything else. But Sean Murphy.
Well, I did see a photo today, Warren, and
yes,
people claimed it was photoshopped, which when I looked at it far closer, it certainly was photoshopped, where Ukraine had claimed that they'd knocked out like 50 Russian missile batteries, and it was one vehicle that had been photoshopped over and over again into the distance, and all the explosions and the fire were actually not on the vehicle, but it looked like they'd been cut and pasted, but they'd put them in the ditch alongside the road.
Yeah, absolutely that.
And they'd claimed that they'd knocked out all this stuff, which was blatantly obvious. They may have knocked out one vehicle, but not a whole line. Look, it was like looking at a convoy that was about a mile long.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was much so obviously it was photoshopped. It was unbelievable. So talk about propaganda. Absolute rubbish.
Thank you very much for that. So let's get into a couple of things that are really, really important there. first of all, the claims that 30,000 Russians are dying a day, a week, sorry. Now that would put it around about four and a bit thousand Russians dying a day. That's simply not true. It is complete nonsense. And whoever is coming out with that, come on the show by all means. You're a liar, you're a propagandist, and you're not telling the truth. Even the Ukrainians aren't losing that. Now, the Ukrainians back in 2023 were round about neck and neck with Russians for soldiers dying. Then it became about 7-8 to 1 after Bakhmut. And then we had the summer offensive, of course, the failed offensive that the Ukrainians had, which saw so many Ukrainians dying needlessly for no good reason whatsoever. And of course, that was around 10-1. I'll let you in a minute, Sean. That was around 10-1. And then, of course, as more and more of these people started dying in Avdiivka, they had lots of their people there. And of course, they started dying. It became about 16-1. And now it's up to well past 18-20-1 that are dying. Now that the Ukrainians have gone back on the defensive, it's back down to about 16-1. But the overall trend is around about 14-15-1. The Russians have lost around about 200,000 men. The Ukrainians have lost around 2.1 million, with another 700,000 injured, 250,000 deserted, 100,000 in captivity. And of course, that's been propped up with Merc. So overall, the Ukrainians have only ever had, throughout the course of this war, 4.1 million soldiers go through. They had 1.1 million soldiers at the height of the offensive in 2023, plus 1.2 million in reserve. They've had 3 conscriptions, normal conscriptions, of 1.4 million. That brought it up to 3.6 million. They've had around about 400,000 where they've beaten them up, thrown them into vans, and thrown them onto the battlefield. And as you lose your best troops, the raw recruits that come in die. I spoke to a couple of Vietnam soldiers, and I've had Americans turn around and go, that's not the case. If you were a grunt in the Vietnam War, fresh into the battlefield, they didn't bother with you. If you survived the first 6 weeks, then they bothered because you were worth bothering with, because your life expectancy in those American groups that were going out on patrol was very, very low indeed. While the Battle of Bakhmut was going on, the life expectancy of a raw recruit thrown into the front line in Bakhmut was 4 hours. 4 hours. Cool enough.
Well, that's the point I was going to make, Warren. The reason they're losing so many men now is because they lost all their good troops early on in those big battles.
They did.
And all they're replacing them with now are people at the CCC of or TCC of press gangs and anybody else they can get their hands on with who have really got no battle experience, no tactical experience, no survival experience, no military experience, and it's no surprise that they're losing such vast numbers now.
No, and you're absolutely right. It is no surprise. And what you have to remember is that when you're looking at these fields, and we've shown the videos of these, there are 248 cemeteries that can house up to 50,000 soldiers apiece. Okay, 248 cemeteries. Now, we're not talking about the Russians or the Ukrainians or favouring either side. We've got people in Russia, we've got people in Ukraine, we've got people in the Red Cross who tell us, and we've got people who actually collect the bodies and do this god awful work, telling us what the numbers are. Okay, Ukraine basically in terms of dead soldiers are around 10-1 across the whole war. So if Russia have lost 212,000, how many have Ukraine lost? It's really, really simple mathematics. And Ukraine literally at the start of 2025, issued that they only had 925,000 troops. That was Army, Air Force, and Navy combined. And of course, they were losing around about 1,500 soldiers a day. It's now down to about 1,200 a day. But last week it went up because they've been throwing them into the front line. Last week alone, Ukraine lost 8,477 soldiers, according to the Russians. Ukraine, according to the Ukrainians, lost 7,569. Now, you can take either one of those if you like, but that is a hell of a lot of soldiers. And the idea that Russia are losing 30,000 soldiers, what the Ukrainians do all the time is they take the Ukrainian losses and they project them onto, and have done since 2023, and they project them as though this was perfectly okay. There's nothing to see here. And of course, the reason that this is all, for everybody to see and everything else is the fact that the Russians are losing these numbers, these huge numbers of 30,000 at a time. And as I say, they've been doing this, and this is not just me saying this. Media Zona, who've been looking at this since 2023, have actually turned around and said, look, this is the case. It's absolutely terrible. They're making it up as they go along. And of course, these people are dying in huge numbers, and they are dying in huge numbers. Here's what Media Zona had to say when the BBC, at the height of the Bakhmut, for the Battle of Bakhmut, had to say this. Okay. Now, this was reported on Intel Republic, but this was Media Zona for the BBC. The BBC did not release this. This was in September 2023. Obituary counts on social media, cemetery construction, amputation disclosures, older inadvertent official disclosures, population service, endless conscription, but no army growth. It all completely internally consistently pointing to the same approximate number of casualties in the 2 to 400K range. This is exactly what you would expect. In fact, this was the case. All these secondary indicators are consistent with each other, and there's no countervailing data besides the obvious lies of Ukrainian officials. Now, the Ukrainian officials this was Media Zona doing this for the BBC. They're not pro-Russian. Given that Media Zona's count of Russians killed in action in the 30,000 range has recently been validated by another inadvertent disclosure on their side of some 8,500 wounded in action returned to duty total in the entire VDD for the entire SMO. So Russia, in September of 2023, had only lost 30,000 troops. And Ukraine have got progressively worse. So how are the Russians now losing 30,000 when the Ukrainians have worse equipment, worse soldiers, and of course, less of it? So you can work that one out. That will give you some mental gymnastics. This all points to an absolutely brutal fact. Now, remember, this is September 2023. For every Russian soldier killed in this war, somewhere between 7 and 13 Ukrainian soldiers died. That's apocalyptic for the Ukrainian army and a disgrace for their Western advisors. This also, by the way, aligns perfectly with the Ukrainian MOD's claims for Russian casualties. This suggests that the Ukrainian MOD's infamously implausible running count of Russian losses is astonishingly actually an accurate report of their own losses. Now, the BBC didn't turn around and tell you what was going on there, okay? And you have seen the handovers. We are saying, Mark Onza, that over 2 million Ukrainian soldiers have been lost since the beginning of the war. So I'm going to give you, once again, the numbers. Sean Murphy first, then I'm going to give you the numbers. Sean.
The thing is, Warren, they've got all these losses, which are absolutely massive. They cannot recruit by any means. That's TCC or conscription or recruitment. They cannot recruit enough to replace in a year, I suspect, what they are losing in a day.
No, let's put it this way. They have to get a certain amount. They have to get a certain amount. If they don't get a certain amount, they've got major problems because they'll end up on the front line themselves. So it is very, very important that, shall we say, that they get the right people in, shall we say? So let's get into this one more time, just to be absolutely clear. So nobody is in any doubt what the losses are when it comes to this. Now, this, of course, flies in the face when they say that there's 30,000 soldiers dying. This is the handover of Ukrainian dead soldiers to Russian dead soldiers. Now, they meet every month, and they have done for ages, so the Americans weren't the ones who got them together. to sort out with the International Red Cross where the handover of the dead bodies will be or the exchange of prisoners. Okay, mainly dead bodies. And of course, this has been going on since the start of the war. So every month, these numbers have been handed over to each other. And as you can see, in 2022, the numbers are fairly okay. Then we get to, if you remember, the disaster that was, of course, should we say, the Battle of Bakhmut, and of course, others, the summer offensive that they had. And then we get to 2024, where the numbers really start to tick over, okay, because all their best troops are gone. And of course, the Russians are not using meat wave tactics anymore. What they're doing is they're sitting off and they're just picking them off. They're leaving one road open. The Ukrainians are trying to go in and out on that road, and they're getting pounded. And then, of course, you see it becomes 5-1, 10-1, 10-1 again. Then you see it becomes around about 14-1, and then it just keeps climbing. And this is where we are now in 2026. These figures you cannot ignore. This is literally, as I say, the last 18 months this has been going on, where the figures now are well over 20-30-1 that they're handing back. That has gone down a little bit because they've gone on the defensive, but the numbers are still the same. So let's take you through this one more time. Ukraine during the height of the special military operation, during their counteroffensive that they were launching against Russia, had 1 million men in the army. They had 1.2 million that were in reserve. Okay. On top of that, they have had 3 conscriptions, which was another 1.4 million men. So 2.2 million men plus 1.4 gives you 3.6. 400,000 that have been bashed over the head or beaten up, thrown into a van, put on the front line. That's 4 million. Then you add in around about 100,000, shall we say, mercenaries from all around the world. Most of them Colombians. There's about 6,000-7,000 dead Colombians. The second most best of these soldiers, of course, are the Polish. And of course, there's many of them. So you're talking about a total overall gang of 4.1 million men. So if you take my figure of 2.1 million, put it to one side, and this is not me saying, this is all different sides saying it. If you take that figure away, okay, and then you go, right, so you've got 4.1 million men. We know that there's about 100,000 in captivity. So that's 400, that's 4 million. 250,000 have run away. We know that from Ukraine's own figures. That gives you 3.7 million. We know that 750,000 are injured. Where's the rest? Where's the rest? That leaves 3 million. Where's the 3 million if they've only got 900,000 men left at the start of 2025? Where did the other 2.1 million go? Lee Williams.
Sorry, I'd say they was burnt away kind of thing.
Well, let's tell you exactly where they went.
Yeah.
Let's tell you exactly where they went, because you're looking at over 248 cemeteries of around about 50 hectares. So 50 hectares. Now you can get 50,000 bodies in those cemeteries. There's 248 of them, plus secret cemeteries that we've shown you outside Kiev and outside cities where they've been digging the graves, ready for the corpses to go in. Ready for those corpses to go in. And then, of course, we've shown you them throwing the bodies in the ovens so they don't have to give or pay out the widows. Because remember that the payout for them is 385,000 for every dead soldier they can identify. So they don't want to identify them. We've shown you literally Black Rock saying, why don't you bury them out in the field? There are mass graves everywhere out in Ukraine. And there are also bodies that have been burnt. And of course, there's lots and lots of people talking about this. But nobody in the West is going to front up to this. And this is not me being pro-Russian. This is me saying you good Ukrainians are dying, decent, ordinary Ukrainians, just like me and you, that are being beaten up, thrown onto the front line, being left there by their commanders, who, by the way, can still claim the money for 3 months if they report them as missing rather than dead. Don't know whether you're aware of that. We did report on it. So this is what we're looking at. And these are people that are telling you, these people that are doing this and all these figures and everything else. Okay, these are the people telling you that literally Russia are losing 30,000 men. Donald Trump is telling you this. Okay, he's being fed this nonsense by his people in the Pentagon from the Ukrainian figures, and everybody knows that Ukraine are absolutely shocking and are doing this all the time. So this nonsense that you're hearing, 30,000 Russian dead, which Zelensky and everybody else was pushing at the Munich conference just the other day, is absolute horse crap. Okay? And I dare and I challenge anybody from the European Union or from the American government or the British, from MI6 or the British government or anybody like Hamish de Bretton Gordon or Ben Hodges or whatever, to come on this show and give me proof that those figures are correct, because you haven't got it. You haven't got it. We've got people that working in the morgues. We've got people in Ukrainian intelligence. We've got Ukrainian soldiers on the front line. We've got Russian soldiers on the front line, Russian intelligence, and we've got our International Red Cross telling us these numbers. Nilus.
Yeah, also what I've heard, I think it's from you as well, Warren. You've got to pay if you want to be, if you're injured and you want to be taken out of and put into hospital. You've got to pay for your family. Have got to pay for your own gravesite and gravestone. And it's people are making a lot of money in Ukraine. There's a small elite making a lot of money out of these soldiers as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's a money-making scam. That's all it is. Good point. Well made. Lee Williams.
I was going to say, is it a factor that they actually leave them without the right food and everything as well when they're in Bolshevik?
Well, we played you video after video of people being left with not enough bullets to be able to do anything. So let's get into exactly what's going on here, because there are still people that are at it. Okay, there are still people that are at it with this nonsense. Let's get into some of this. Here's Stoltenberg. You remember him, the one who turned around and said that there was no such thing as a promise made by Secretary Baker to Mikhail Gorbachev, that if they let a united Germany into NATO, they wouldn't take one step further east. That was him. Remember telling you that document didn't exist. We've shown it to you.
Toward what end? Because some people have trouble saying that they believe Ukraine should win. Do you believe Ukraine must win on the battlefield? Otherwise, Europe's own future is at stake. I mean, is there any way that Ukraine can have a piecemeal peace deal and that your country is safe?
Well, I believe it's absolutely possible for Ukraine to prevail and to ensure that Russia is not winning this war, because.
But does Ukraine need to win? You're still sidestepping.
But it depends a bit what you mean by winning. If you mean Ukraine being able to liberate all the territory that Russia controls today, well, that's a very long way to go. But for Ukraine to be able to impose so heavy costs on Russia that they have to sit down and agree some kind of peaceful end to this war where Ukraine prevails as a sovereign independent state, that's absolutely possible. Because you have to look at the facts. The facts is that over the last year, in 2025, Russia was able to increase the control of territory that equals to 0.8%, less than 1%.
John Murphy.
Well, Warren, it's surprising. I think it was it Lewis or Nillis was saying about them being left with no food and ammunition and water. If you look on the internet, look on eBay, look on some of these other sites that sell surplus, you can buy Ukrainian MREs. Now, you would think that they would need every MRE that they can get their hands on for their soldiers, and you can buy them on the internet. Why?
Yeah.
Well, we know why.
Good call.
Because they're being squared away and sold online to preppers and things like that.
They are.
Instead of going to it, instead of these MREs And Ukrainian specifically.
Just explain to everybody, Sean, what an MRE is, because most of them aren't military like we are.
An MRE is like compo rations, but it's a meals ready to eat.
There you go. Meals ready to
normally
eat.
foil sealed bags that can be dropped in a pan of water or a water bottle mug full of hot boiling water and heated up in the field. And there's enough nutrition in there. And it's massive in calories, like 4,000 calories a day to sustain soldiers when they're in the field.
Yeah, but they're being sold online and they're being thieved, same as the weapons and everything else. Quarter of the weapons and a third of the rations that have made their way to Ukraine have gone walkabout. Louis Vastor. Good point, Sean.
I want to remember that most of the Ukrainians that are refugees are the rich ones that could leave and pay the border control with the husbands and wives and kids and uncles and aunts and grandfathers. The ones that stayed behind are the poor ones. They can't do anything.
No, absolutely.
This is the problem. And
no, the rich people.
The moment you receive something or have what do you call it, supplies, the rich ones take it. Because even here in Europe, we've just been discussing that online. Here in Europe, the Ukrainians that are here, they want everything for free. They don't want to integrate. They're waiting for the war to finish so they can go back to their homes if they have. And they're getting 1,500 euros a month here. So they're on holiday, basically. And these are the rich ones. The poor ones have to go fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And while we're at it, good point made by Lewis there. The nightclubs, Vladimir Klitschko's nightclubs, these strip joints, which are not really strip joints, if you get my meaning, they've got power because they've bought all the generators, the 38 generators that were sent by Poland, very, very simply, when they were sent by Poland to Ukraine, they all ended up online being sold to the highest bidder, not to look after the people of Kiev. Now, Jens Stoltenberg came out with one piece of utter nonsense there, turning around and saying that Russia have only moved forward 0.1% in a year and a half. Simply not true. The Russians don't fight like that. Now, I'm going to give you a tactic that has been around in Russia. They did this with the French when the French had to retreat out of Russia and they just started picking them off. It is called the Komodo tactic. And just in case you haven't got a clue, we're going to get into the maps in a second, but I want you to see this 4-minute video of how Komodo dragons hunt their prey. These are the tactics that Russia use when they're fighting a war on their own soil, and they have done ever since 1655. Have a look at this.
When it comes to the truly ruthless pursuit of prey, there is one hunter you don't want to meet. The Komodo dragon, the biggest lizard on the planet, 10 feet long and weighing 300 pounds. It's the height of the dry season. Perfect times for a dragon. In the pitiless heat, buffalo concentrate at the shrinking water holes. The dragon is wary of getting too close. A jab from those horns, even a kick from those legs, could badly injure him. He knows all he needs is just one bite. It's just a nip, a flesh wound, but it alerts the other dragons close by. Like sharks, they're attracted by blood. They gather round and watch the buffalo's every move for days. The wound doesn't heal. This is the Komodo dragon's secret weapon. Its bite injected a poisonous cocktail of bacteria and venom. As days turn into weeks, the buffalo weakens. And the dragons wait. That's all they have to do. Just bear the hunger, watch, and wait for the poison to take effect.
And there we are. Now that should give you an idea of exactly what happens. Now that is exactly what Russia do. They call it the Komodo dragon tactic. And Jens Stoltenberg, you need to learn this because they'll come in, they'll hit you, they'll take little bites out of you. They won't risk getting damaged in any way, shape or form, but they'll leave you walking around, bleeding, wounded. And then when they're ready, they will surround you. They did the same to Napoleon. They did the same to Hitler's forces, where they just literally then surrounded them and wiped them out. And that is how Russia fight wars. And until Jens Stoltenberg and people in the supposedly in the know, all these wonderful military experts, get some idea of how the Russians actually fight wars, you're going to lose. Nilus, then Louis Bastos.
Yeah, a part of that poison is also attacking Ukrainian supply lines as well.
Yeah,
I heard that most of the lot of the drone action that Russians have is not on the front line, but it's on attacking supplies.
yes,
And
you're absolutely right.
As we saw, the Ukrainians are already siphoning off their supplies to make an extra profit in the rest of the world.
To give it the best analogy, Nilus, while the buffalo's in the watering hole, somebody's coming along and draining the blood off. Louis Bastos.
It's the difference between professional discipline and amateur thrown off the front line.
Yeah.
Basically, that's it. Russia plays chess. Ukraine don't know how to play chess. They don't have the patience to think before they act. They act Nazis, basically. They want to get it over and done quickly because they're losing too many people.
Yeah.
As the Russians, they know they're not losing too many. They sit and wait, like snipers, and wait, but they play the chess game. They are more disciplined. They are more professional. And the poor people that Ukrainians are losing are all, most of them have been thrown on the front line and don't want to fight.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you very much for that. Nilus, very quickly. We want to get on to the map. Yep.
During Napoleon's time, the Cossacks were used to disrupt his supply lines, but also Ukraine is playing the game to impress the West.
Yeah,
and they've got Western generals advising them, and they need a good publicity because they need that Western money. Without that good, they won't get them. They're less likely they'll get their money.
Yeah, and once again, this just goes to show how stupid the people in the West are. Good point, well made. So here's Zaporozhye. This is outside of Primorsk. Now, this is only about 6 or 7 miles away from Zaporizhia city, okay? And once again, as you can see there, little blue tick there where the Russians have retreated. And of course, like the water buffalo, if the buffalo goes to charge them, Komodo dragons will just retreat out of the way and wait. Then they'll have another bite at them and everything else. And this is exactly what the Russians do when it comes to this war. When they see that Ukrainians get a massive force and they go charging it, Russians are quite happy to give ground. And this is what Stoltenberg doesn't get, because then they fill up the cauldron again with troops and the Russians can surround them, just like you saw the dragons doing there, surrounding at the waterhole of everybody there. So that's on the way to Zaporozhye, which they're only now about 7 miles away from. And when you sort of look at that and you look at what's going on and everything that's happening, we're going to show you bit by bit. And of course, the Institute for the Study of War, which is run by Victoria Nuland, will have you believe that Pokrovsk is actually in Ukrainian hands. It is not. As you can see, these yellow areas are areas that the Russians have just taken over. And of course, the areas you can see here, in between, the red is the Russians, the blue is the Ukrainians. And as you can see, there's Pokrovsk, okay? Pokrovsk, that everybody turned around and said that the Institute for the Study of War will turn around and tell you is in the hands of Ukrainians. It simply is not. This is Victoria Nuland's sister-in-law runs this website, okay? It is the Kagan brothers. Just go and have a look at them. And of course, right down here is Avdiivka. You remember the fight for that, which cost over 70,000 Ukrainian troops. Well, just look at the distance, okay? And this is what they do. They surround you, and bit by bit, they start. And nothing is more, shall we say, important or more of a look at how this is going on. Nothing is more important and a look at how this is going on than Konstantinivka. Okay, they surrounded Pokrovsk. They're doing the same in Konstantinivka. Here you can see a cauldron. Okay, there's a cauldron here, and very simply, they leave one road open that you go along. This road here is open. They can travel along that road, and of course, the Russians have complete firepower. So all they're doing is picking you off going in, picking you off coming out, and they're not getting their soldiers killed at all. But they're able to slaughter many, many Ukrainians, and of course pick off the vehicles and turn the vehicles into a dump. Now we've shown you over and over again the amount of death, and they always call it the death road. You will see it over and over again, and we've shown you on many occasions death roads where you see roads of burning vehicles, and of course they will turn around and go, oh no, that's not true. It is true. We've shown you in Pokrovsk, we showed you the road of death. Minorad, we showed you the road of death, and how bad that is, and how many people were getting slaughtered, how many of their equipment, and of course, should we say, their senior advisors going in and saying, oh no, you're going to be perfectly okay, just do this, you'll be fine. Here we go. Have a look at this. This is in Minorad, which is now captured and fully in Russian hands. This was literally a couple of months ago. Have a look at this. So what happens, we're just showing you the Minorad one there, but what happens is they literally go along these roads, try to get people in down these roads, as we've just shown you there, So Constantinica, that's the latest one. You've got a cauldron. They've got firepower on all sides, drones and everything else. They can pick off anyone going in and anyone going out. And of course, Minorad is the area that was completely surrounded, where tons and tons of troops had to surrender. And of course, Minorad is a little place just down here. And of course, that is fully, as I said, with Pokrovsk and everything else. But the Institute for the Study of War and everybody else will tell you that that is in Ukrainian hands. It's complete and utter nonsense and a lie. Just above that area, of course, is Izium, and that is the next place that they're going to go for. This is Izium here. This is a major hub, as you can see, with all the roads coming off it. And once they get that and cut that off, Kramatorsk and, of course, the Sloviansk are below that. So they have created a cauldron once again here. And once again, you will find that there are just small roads coming along here. They will have firepower over that road, and they will stop them from getting in. So once they get up to here, they'll cut off that road, and all the men that are in that area there, which we believe there's about 8,000 men in there, will be completely cut off. And the pattern will repeat, the Komodo dragon tactic. Just leave that open, pick them off as you go. Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. Let's get into this. So here's Slavyansk, here's Kramatorsk. Now, very simply, Constantinica, which we just showed you where that road is coming out. This is the road from Constantinica up to Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. Now, these are the last two major cities left in the Donbass. And as you can see, the Russians are just inching their way forward bit by bit. And of course, up here, they are able to cut off this road. Once they cut this road off completely, and this section here, which again will be littered with Ukrainian male bodies, soldiers and conscripts who don't know what they're doing, and vehicles. I am going to make you a prediction now. When they get to this area here, you are going to see a ton of Ukrainian vehicles and Ukrainian bodies, the same as we have been seeing. They're literally going to salami. It's literally going to be Komodo tactics. They're just going to pick them off, pick them off, pick them off. And when they're too weak, they'll go in, they'll surround them, and they'll either kill them or they will surrender. And of course, that will be another area under Russian control. And of course, they're doing the same out at sea. Let's just have a quick look at Odessa. Now, Odessa, the port, is almost completely done because the Russians have literally a blockade of the Odessa port there, and they're pummeling it every night, every single night. The Russians are able to stick 1,000 drones, the Garand drones, in the air, missiles hitting the ports and anything that he's trying to get through. So it is a really, really bad place that the Ukrainians are in at the moment. It's no wonder they want a peace deal. Mark Onza.
Is France still threatening to join in if Odessa goes war? And are they still around that port area?
It is, buddy. So let's give you a heads up. You're absolutely right. Down here, of course, just down here. Now, this was the idea that Odessa would be the grain ships, Ukrainian grain, which they get money for, would go to Turkey, and then they'd sail back, completely okay, with weapons in to help alleviate the war situation. But the problem being, of course, the Russians were very wise to that in no time at all. The whole idea is the French are down in Romania, ready to make a bolt across the border for Odessa. Now, the general idea is that base, of course, on the Romanian coastline is the biggest NATO base that there is, and they're expanding it. Now, the whole idea is that the French will literally go in there. The British Air Force and the French Navy will escort those tankers. But the French very much don't want the port of Odessa to fall into Russian hands. It's going to. Now, it may be that Russia has to negotiate that away, but the biggest battle of all, the biggest prize of all, is Odessa, Mark. So hopefully that helps you out. But yes, the French have over 2,000 vehicles and over 6,000 men stationed just inside Romania across the border from Odessa. So yes, you're absolutely right. So I hope that helps. Here's the next thing that we want to talk about. And of course, that's Sumy, of course. And of course, you can see this region here, and slowly but surely, there's the border there. You can see the white line is the border. The Russians are just inching forward bit by bit. They're not trying to do anything else now because they pretty much know that they can hold on to this area indefinitely. They've got plenty of air defenses. They've got plenty of men there and everything else that are able to look after them. But the real prize, the secondary prize after, of course, Odessa is Kharkiv. And of course, why is Kharkiv? Because very much the Russians see this as part and parcel of what they want to have as part of the Novorossiya. And of course, they're not willing to give this up. Now, the battle for Kupiansk, of course, the Russians here are retreating, allowing the Ukrainians to come in once again. As soon as the Ukrainians send plenty of people in there, they smash their forces. Now, why is this so important? Because of this road network here. And then, of course, they will start to move all the way through Shenkova. And we have spoken about this before. Martova is the area they want. Martov, or Martova, as some people call it, is the area they want. And that, for them, is, shall we say, the Dust Bowl Kharkiv. So Kharkiv is just up here. But as you can see here, Martova, very much, if they get all of this area here, literally they had, what can I say, they've cut the whole area off. And the whole idea is once again to slice it in half so nobody is going to be able to get hold of it. And they call it, the Russians call it the Kharkiv Bowl. Let's have a look. So there's Kharkiv, which is the major city, which of course they're threatening, of course, from the north as well. And of course, they are expecting the attack to come from the north. But that's not what's going to happen. What they want is they want to get hold of Martova here, and they want to make this a bottleneck here. So Chuhiv is where they want to be eventually, because once they bottleneck this, if they can get their forces down the side here to Martova, and of course, that means taking care of Kupiansk, and then, of course, surrounding this in a cauldron. Then that cauldron gets closed. They straighten that line. They move on to Martova, and then from there, they'll go to Chuyiv, and that shuts off Kharkiv supply lines because there's a lot of water there and everything else. That is a choke point for the Ukrainian army. So if they can get around the back here, the choke point for the Ukrainian army cuts off this entire area. And this area at the moment, where the Ukrainians are throwing men along this road into Kupiansk, and they're dying in great numbers. And it's going to keep happening. I'm sorry, I know it sounds awful. And everybody goes, well, why don't the Russians do this, that, and the other? The Russians do not need to do anything, okay? At the moment, we're seeing Ukrainians do something really, really stupid, which is counterattacking Andriivka. And as you can see, the Russians are literally falling back, letting them come onto the punch. And of course, then they'll just wipe them out. But if people turn around and go, oh, well, the Russians are not doing this, that, and the other. The Russians are denazifying and demilitarizing Ukraine because they know that the Americans and nobody else will. If the Russians wanted to, they could end this war in one quick hit. It would cost a lot of men to do it. But there's Cherniv, okay? Here, very, very simply, they could just come through. You remember Suja, where the Ukrainians went flying in there and they lost 70,000 men occupying this place for a couple of months. And then the Russians, of course, surrounded them, wiped them out. We spoke to a guy who was actually part of it. And then, of course, if they took Cherniv here, then Kiev is just here. If they really wanted to take Kiev, the Russians, and they were willing to sacrifice men to do it, it wouldn't be difficult. This is not a long journey, okay? So all you people out there who are going, oh, Russia this, Russia aren't doing very well, you're talking absolute nonsense, and you don't have the first idea of war. Don't take my word for it. We're going to listen to a guy now called Scott from Calibrated. He's very, very good. He doesn't always agree with me, but then again, we get it from our sources who are there. Scott keeps a very close eye on this. Let's play you. It's 20 minutes long. He's going to give you a detailed rundown of everything that's going on the front lines.
Welcome back in, everybody, to another Calibrated Ukraine battle map update. Today is February the 13th, 2026, and we have a ton to go over today, including the blockage of Starlink and Telegram for Russian forces, and some general map updates, as well as the ongoing Ukrainian counterattacks in the Zaporozhye and Dnipropetrovsk regions. If you guys are new here, please consider subscribing if you are not already subscribed. If you enjoyed today's content, please consider leaving a like and a comment. It helps me with the algorithm. Thank you all so much. Without further ado, let's go ahead and just get, shall we? See, bring up the map here. All right. We are going to start with the ongoing Ukrainian counterattacks. I believe that this is very important because it is going to have massive effects on the battlefield in the coming 6 to 9 months time period range, right? The Ukrainians have been doing a ton of mobilization as of late, snatching people off the streets, throwing them into the trenches. So their manpower has somewhat stabilized for the time being. This is not something that is going to be able, you know, they're not going to be able to continue doing this at the rate that they are doing. There are not many, you know, draftable men left in Ukraine to go fight. They are quite literally beating people up, assaulting them, throwing them into vehicles, keeping them in basically prisons until they reach the front line, and then they're stuck there, right? So that's the ongoing situation. And remember previously we had talked about how the Ukrainians were attacking around Kupiansk, right? That was the big thing. Kupiansk is falling back to the Ukrainians, blah, 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 blah. And at the time, I made it a specific point to say, number one, there's a lot of false information going around the Ukrainian information space right now. They're hyping this up. They do this all the time. They did this with Minhorod and Pokrovsk. They did this with Kupiansk, and they are now doing it in the south in the Zaporozhye and Dnipropetrovsk regions. So up here in the Kupiansk region, we can see that the Russians were never cleared out of the western part of Kupiansk. They were also never pushed back fully out of the eastern part of Kupiansk and the eastern Oskil bridgehead, which the Ukrainians do have people in still. As you can see, the Russians are expanding out their zone of control again. The gray zone is expanding rapidly in this Oskil bridgehead for the Ukrainians. So the situation here is not stable. The Ukrainians are now losing the territory, which they had recently gone on the offensive to regain. And when you're looking at the map, what you have to pay attention to is just what the Ukrainians are attempting to achieve through their objectives and what they are actually achieving. So we look at Kupiansk. Kupiansk was a pretty isolated bridgehead on the western portion. The Ukrainians are easily able to stage over here and attack into this direction. They did sustain heavy losses. They did take a number of vehicle losses as well, some important SPGs and stuff like that in support of this operation, which never ended up fully clearing the Russians out of the western half of Kupiansk after they had just basically walked in, as well as not clearing the eastern half of Kupiansk, Petropavlivka, any of these important areas. And at the time, I had specifically said that this was not going to happen. The Ukrainians do not have the manpower capabilities. They do not have the force composition to go on these long-term extended offensives like we maybe saw in 2023 during the counteroffensive. They don't have that capability anymore. It's just a fact. And we see it now with the loss of Minhorod and Pokrovsk, which they tried desperately to hold in the Drobopila area. We've now seen it in the Kupiansk section. And as we go to the south, we are going to see it again. So just in terms of the updates down here, Russian forces have captured the village of Zeleshine outside of Holyai-Polye. That is just a pretty standard advance in this direction. That's nothing particularly to note. However, it does put the Russians closer to the Orikhiv section of the front. Where the Ukrainians are counterattacking is here in the Drobopila direction and from the Turivate area to Novozaporozhye. And then as well up here, you know, this area has not been fully controlled by the Russians. So even though the map shows full control, maps nowadays are a little bit different than they were, say, in 2022, 2023, 2024. The battlefield is a lot more spacious and empty now. The ability for DRG's, deep reconnaissance units, to get into specific areas and create chaos is there, right? And so when you're looking at the map, this is not just a solid wall of defense here for the Russians. These are just open fields, right? There's fortifications in here. I just am trying to give you guys an idea of where the general front line is. And as I always say, 1 to 2 kilometers in either direction should be considered a gray zone, just period, right? Unless you're talking about a town like Holyai-Polye, which is fully under Russian control. You are looking at areas that just have space. There could be a Russian garrison right here defending this section of the front and one over here, and the Ukrainians are able to slip down a tree line and get into one of these small villages like Verbove or Oleksivka or something like that. And it's really not that far. It's a couple miles. So like an hour walk, a 2-hour walk, a 30-minute bike ride, right? A motorcycle, 20 minutes, 10 minutes to any of these locations. So a lot of what we've been seeing are sort of these suicide attacks. Again, just like we saw in Kupiansk, the guys are trying to get deep as possible, plant flags, get geolocations, and then get out. A lot of the Ukrainian sources are definitely overhyping this, and I think some of the more neutral sources are buying into the information warfare that is currently being spread. This is sometimes I talk about other mappers. I'm not going to specifically mention anybody because it just doesn't matter. But I do believe that some of these mappers are listening to their reliable sources, because these sources are generally reliable, but all of those reliable sources end up buying into the information warfare being pushed out by the Ukrainian government. They go along with it either by choice or by bias, right? They want it to happen, or they're being told to make it happen. And then this unreliable information is coming out from regularly reliable sources and affecting maps. One of the biggest red flags I have with some of the map updates from some of the other mappers right now is that none of the territory which they're showing as the Ukrainian counterattack is in gray zone. It's all blue. It's all been consolidated, and that's just really not how this war works anymore. And so that's a huge red flag. The second you have people immediately saying this has been captured, this has been captured, that's been captured, and this has been captured without geolocations, without recent updates, a lot of the geolocations that some of these mappers are working off of are now 10 to 12 days old. So it's just, I think it's bad information on top of normally reliable sources pushing a propaganda narrative of this Ukrainian success in this area. The real Ukrainian success has been mapped here, and this was basically the reason why it turned red is because Russians got into the town, took pictures all over the place, and then the Ukrainians counterattacked, right? So this is the very edge of the front. This can be expected in these areas, small counterattacks. But any major developments here, I have not seen evidence of. I have not seen continued evidence of Ukrainian presence. And what I think you're seeing is, like I said, these kamikaze attacks where they're just sending guys in, looking for holes, looking for opportunities. The guys get in there, they might take a picture, they might be spotted by an FPV drone and get hit by a drone, and that's how you get a geolocation. Oh, there's guys in this area. Or, there's shelling of certain areas. A lot of mappers are using Sentinel to prescribe advances and stuff like that, and it just doesn't work like that. You can have an area being shelled for months and months and months by the Russians. The whole town is erased. It shows up on Sentinel as progress in this direction based off of the deformation of the ground because of artillery strikes, bomb strikes, whatever it is. But that doesn't mean that there is consolidated presence of either side in any of these areas. So I would just ask everybody just to really pause before you start pushing that sort of information or believing that sort of information, because it just doesn't represent reality. Okay. All right. Moving up to the Konstantinivka area. We have a Russian advance here into Stepanivka, nothing major. Again, the dead zone in this city is getting worse and worse here. I will bring it up. It has now extended. I will actually extend this dead zone because it has extended itself, or the Russians have extended it. So what you're going to see here now is this new dead zone that has grown. The Ukrainians basically have no options in here. If you go to my recent Telegram or Twitter posts, you can see that not only did the Russians blow this pond over here, I guess you would call it, not a reservoir, but a pond, draining all of the water into this area and into the Kryvyi Torets River, as well as striking certain bridges in this area. Particularly, this bridge was struck by Russian munitions. So the ability for the Ukrainians to supply, particularly the southwestern portion of Konstantinivka, has become incredibly difficult. And it's getting worse and worse by the day. We also see continued use of Fab 3000s and Fab 1500s on Ukrainian deployment points in these large buildings within the city. So not only are they taking casualties along the front line, not only are they taking casualties logistically trying to get into the city, like I said in my recent post, you'll be able to see both Ukrainian logistics being targeted as well as these large bomb strikes on deployment points. So heavy casualties here, Ukrainians not achieving a lot of success. And as I mentioned, this fortification being on the high ground, this area being on the high ground, the Russians dominate the high ground around Konstantinivka now. They are looking down on the city, makes the defense of the city even more difficult. Okay, moving over to the eastern portion of Konstantinivka. Russian forces have just reestablished themselves in this dacha forested area here. Not particularly immense advance. However, it does put the Russians onto the high ground in this area, which will further benefit the Russians in their fight for Konstantinivka. All right, moving up to the Seversk, Kramatorsk section of the front here. Kind of in a weird place, don't know what to call it. I call it the canal section, where the Seversky Donetsk canal runs through. Russian forces have just closed this little pocket and improved their position heading towards the canal, which, if I will remind you, lies along the high ground, which will look down into Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Druskivka, and not really Konstantinivka, but you can see that the canal here also offers that provision. So, not a major advance in this direction. Things have sort of slowed here, but I do expect it to pick up. As I mentioned, the current Ukrainian counterattacks in the south are pulling manpower from every section of the front. And I think that at the end of the day, what Sersky is thinking and what the Ukrainian military is thinking is that they can have Ukrainians die for these cities if the Russians reach them. You cannot have Ukrainians die in this area to defend it from the Russian advance that is probably going to come in the spring. So they are trying to reestablish themselves along the Haichur River here, pushing the Russians back behind the defensive line and reestablishing themselves. However, with the fall of Holyai-Polye, I find that to be an extremely remote possibility. And so the battle goes on, but I think that in a couple of weeks, just like Kupiansk was a couple of weeks ago, we will not be hearing about the Ukrainian successes in this area. It'll go back to regular Russian advances, and they will turn to something else, whatever the next thing is. Particularly, what's also feeding this, and I put this in I'll put this in the thumbnail, is that first off, the West has cut off Starlink to the Russians. So Starlink was a mobile internet resource that the Russians were using, and the Ukrainians use it as well. It's a very, very beneficial tool to have on the battlefield for communication and stuff like that. Elon Musk's SpaceX has now terminated or blacklisted Russian Starlinks that are being used, quote unquote, illegally. Those Starlinks are now offline. And so there's all of this talk about the Russian communication and command structure collapsing, right? And I made a post on Twitter talking about the Telegram test, because Telegram has also been blocked by the Russian government. I see this as a positive move for the Russians. You're hearing a lot of bitching and moaning from a lot of different resources, mostly on Telegram. And the reason for that is a lot of people make money off of Telegram. A lot of people use Telegram as a means of, getting support. So this is another money thing, but in terms of like financial aid for certain units, the Ukrainians do this all the time. The Russians do this as well. Those donation avenues for revenue are gone, right? For the Russians. So that's a huge thing, and that's why you're hearing a lot of complaining. Additionally, some communication was done on Telegram, but here's the thing. Do you want Telegram, which is controlled by a private company outside of Russia, to control all of your communications? What if they just shut down all of the Russian ability to use Telegram at some random point, right? So what the Russians have done is gone ahead and blocked that. There are multiple reasons. There are negative reasons for this too. Obviously, the propaganda effect is massive. If you block Telegram inside of Russia, for one, it will immensely hinder the Ukrainian ability to sabotage inside of Russia, to conduct operations like Spiderweb and conduct operations like the St. Petersburg cafe bombing, assassination attempts. Things like this get much, much more difficult because Telegram is just this open messenger that is often used to recruit people inside of Russia for these tasks. So that is a first and foremost a major counterintelligence W, I would say, for the Russians. But it also, what it does is it reduces your ability to speak freely, reduces your ability to commentate and report on the war. So what I do believe you will see is a slowdown of information in the information space, because half of the army now that's fighting is no longer able to use Telegram. But the Ukrainian take on all of this is that the command and control has broken down. The Russians have no ability to communicate, and they're just lost. This is not what's happening. There are other means of communications. And by the way, the Russians blocking this means that they have to develop something on their own to replace it, which I think is going to be, in the long run, beneficial for the Russian military, for the Russian state, and will just benefit the Russians through their military objectives in Ukraine, not being able to be, one, hacked, two, have false information presented and take it seriously. I think that this is just a good management move from the Russians, although it would have been, I think, more beneficial to have a very resounding replacement available and ready to go at the time of the disconnect. And
so there we are. Hopefully you enjoyed that little bit from Calibrated. Now, he is very good, and he goes into very great detail. And of course, he has his own opinions as well. But very, very simply, to sort of close out the first half of the show, there is still some more Russian to come, and there is still some more videos to show you, which can't show you on normal media because they will shut down the idea that you can watch that. Very, very simply, if you haven't got the idea yet of how Russia waged war, then you are already losing, but you're going to lose huge. And of course, the Russians, as far as they're concerned, they think that the West is not interested in peace, and therefore they're carrying out their own demilitarization, their own denazification, and their own shortening or lowering of the amount of troops that Ukraine will have available to them when this war is over. So they're literally doing their own SMO, because they don't believe for 1 second, not for 1 second, that the West is serious about peace. And the trouble is, the Americans and everybody else think they're being ever so clever with literally killing off any chance of the peace talks or whatever. The Americans making their demands, Europe making their demands, and Zelensky making their demands are actually playing into Russian hands. Any of this nonsense you're hearing about them killing 30,000 soldiers, the Ukrainians killing 30,000 Russian soldiers, is nonsense. The Russian economy in the toilet is nonsense. They are able to put more men in the field. They've only got 27% of their actual battle force there. The rest are waiting for NATO to join in, which NATO aren't going to do. But the Russians are not going to be egged on into committing all their forces into this battle. So they've got plenty in waiting, plenty in training, just in case you weren't aware. And of course, they caught me on the hop the first time. I had some bad information, but I've got some new information, a new source now on what is happening with the North Koreans. And the North Koreans are actually training at the moment inside of Russia. And there are 7,500 North Koreans training ready for the summer. So they're getting 5 or 6 months real hefty training at the moment. And of course, as far as Kim Jong-un is concerned, they're getting battlefield experience, which is exactly what he wants, which doesn't all go well for people who are going to try and take North Korea on, because he's wanting to rotate troops in and out to give them battlefield experience. And this time we've got a really good source who's being absolutely honest that there are North Koreans in training. When we asked how many there were, he was able to tell us as well. So we'll keep you updated on that, because there is lots more to see when it comes to that. Thank you very much for watching the first half of the show. Of course, as I say, we have to leave you now. But if you want to see more, come onto Patreon, type in Warren Thornton, come and be part of the club, come and have your say, and also see what's really going on in the world, rather than what they're telling you is going on.
Noble Gold. Real assets. Real value.